I still remember the last time I heard the final bell ring at Riverside High. It was a Friday in late May, unseasonably cold for Colorado spring. The sound echoed through empty hallways where student artwork still hung, waiting to be taken down for summer break. I stood in my classroom, room 237, surrounded by the familiar smell of chalk dust and old books, knowing it would be the last time I'd ever grade papers at my desk or write tomorrow's lesson on the whiteboard. 12 years of teaching gone in an instant, all because of what happened with Jeremy. The official report said he was troubled, that no one could have seen it coming, but I did see it. I saw the way his essays grew darker, how his normally precise handwriting became erratic. I noticed when he stopped raising his hand in class discussions about The Catcher in the Rye, his favorite book just months before. I reported everything to the administration, filed all the proper paperwork, followed every protocol. They said I did everything right. They said it wasn't my fault, but they still asked for my resignation. The whispers started almost immediately. In small towns like ours, news travels fast, and rumors travel faster. Parents who used to greet me warmly at the grocery store now hurried their children to different aisles. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Even my closest friends started making excuses to cancel our weekly coffee dates. I lasted 3 months in that suffocating atmosphere before putting my house on the market. The real estate agent advised me to price it low for a quick sale. "Given the circumstances," she said, not meeting my eyes. I took whatever I could get and moved into a small apartment in Denver, thinking the anonymity of the city might help. It didn't. The nightmares followed me. In them, I was always back in my classroom, but something was wrong. The desks would be arranged in perfect rows, but all facing the wrong way. The whiteboard would be covered in writing that looked like mine, but said things I would never write. And Jeremy? He was always there, sitting in the back row, staring at me with eyes that weren't quite human anymore. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, reaching for my phone to check the news, terrified I'd see his name again. But of course, I never did. You can't die twice, after all. During the day, I tried to keep busy. I picked up substitute teaching jobs at various schools around Denver, but word always seemed to get around eventually. The assignments would slowly dry up, and I'd have to find new schools further and further from my apartment. That's how I found myself scrolling through job listings at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, desperate for something, anything, that would let me start over. The advertisement caught my eye immediately. Caretaker wanted, remote mountain location. Seeking solitary individual for winter caretaking duties at private property in Colorado Rockies. Minimal human contact required. Must be comfortable with isolation and strictly following guidelines. Housing provided. Generous compensation. Background check required. No phone calls. There was an email address listed. Nothing else. I stared at it for a long time, the blue light of my laptop screen burning my tired eyes. It seemed too perfect, almost suspiciously so. But what did I have to lose? I crafted my email carefully, being upfront about my past, but emphasizing my attention to detail and ability to follow rules. I didn't expect a response, but one came less than an hour later. "Ms. Mason, your candor is appreciated. Your situation interests us. Attached, please find preliminary paperwork and detailed job description. If still interested after review, further instructions will follow." Property management. The attachments were extensive. Liability waivers, non-disclosure agreements, detailed maps showing the property's location deep in the Rockies. The job description was oddly specific about some things. exact times for property checks, precise temperature settings for different rooms, and strangely vague about others, references to special maintenance procedures and unique property features. I signed everything that night. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparations. I sold most of my furniture, put the rest in storage, and gave notice at my apartment. My neighbors seemed relieved to see me go. Mrs. Martinez from next door, who used to bring me homemade tamales, wouldn't even look at me as I carried out my last boxes. The morning I left, Denver was just waking up. The sun hadn't fully risen, casting long shadows between the buildings as I loaded my old Honda Civic with what remained of my life. The car protested when I turned the key, as if warning me about what lay ahead. But I had to go. I had to escape. The drive into the mountains was longer than expected. My phone lost signal about 2 hours in, right where the paved road gave way to gravel. The GPS had already started glitching, showing me driving through empty space, so I switched to the printed directions I'd been provided. Turn left at the lightning-struck pine, marked with red ribbon. Follow the path until you see 3 rocks stacked like a cairn. At the fork, take the right path, do not take the left. Continue until you see the cabin. Simple enough, but something about the capitalized warning made my stomach twist. I followed the directions carefully, checking and double-checking each landmark. The forest grew denser as I climbed higher, the trees pressing closer to the road until their branches scraped against my car's roof. It was late afternoon by the time I spotted the cabin. The setting sun cast long shadows through the pine forest, making the building look almost sinister. It matched the photo I'd been sent, an aging wooden structure with peeling paint and a slightly sagging roof. Thick vines crept up its sides like grasping fingers, and the windows were partially obscured by dirt and cobwebs. As I pulled up, I noticed something odd about the shadows around the cabin. They seemed to move wrong, flowing against the wind rather than with it. I blamed it on fatigue from the drive. The porch creaked ominously under my feet as I approached the front door. The key was exactly where they said it would be, tucked under a loose board that shifted too easily, as if it had been moved many times before. As I bent to retrieve it, I felt a distinct sensation of being watched. I scanned the tree line but saw nothing except the endless forest stretching in every direction. The key turned smoothly in the lock, but the door resisted opening, as if something on the other side was pushing back. When it finally swung inward, the smell hit me immediately. Musty and thick, like old books and damp wood, with an underlying metallic tang that made my nose wrinkle. The interior was surprisingly spacious, filled with heavy furniture that looked like it had been there for generations. Dark wood dominated everything. The floors, the walls, the massive bookshelf that took up one entire wall of the living room. Faded photographs in tarnished frames lined the hallway, showing various people standing in front of the cabin. Something about their faces seemed wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. On the kitchen counter, I found an envelope with my name, written in precise, almost mechanical handwriting. Inside was a note that would change everything. "Welcome to your new position, Ms. Mason. Basic supplies are stocked in the pantry. Monthly deliveries will arrive on the first Tuesday of each month. Do not attempt to interact with the delivery person. They have been instructed not to engage. Your primary duties are maintenance and upkeep of the property. A detailed list of tasks can be found in the maintenance manual in the kitchen drawer. Do not deviate from the prescribed schedules. Important. Before beginning your duties, you must read the rules located in the basement. The basement key is attached to this note. Do not delay in reading these rules. Your safety depends on strict adherence to them. Welcome to the family management. I fingered the small brass key attached to the note. Something about the way family was written made my skin crawl. The letters seemed slightly darker than the rest, as if whoever wrote it had pressed harder on those words. The sun was setting now, casting an orange glow through the grimy windows that made the dust motes dance like embers. I decided to bring in my belongings before it got dark. Each trip to the car felt longer than the last, and the shadows between the trees seemed to grow denser with every passing minute. Inside, I began exploring my new home. The cabin was bigger than it appeared from outside. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a stone fireplace, and a surprisingly modern kitchen. The bathroom had clearly been renovated recently, with new fixtures that looked almost out of place among the cabin's otherwise antiquated features. But something felt off about the layout. The rooms didn't quite seem to match up with the cabin's exterior dimensions. Hallways appeared slightly longer from one direction than they did from the other, and there was the constant feeling that spaces shifted when they weren't being directly observed. I was unpacking dishes in the kitchen when I first heard it, a soft humming coming from somewhere in the walls. The sound was almost musical, rising and falling in a pattern that seemed just on the edge of familiar. But when I pressed my ear to the wall, it stopped completely. That's when I remembered the rules in the basement. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees as I approached the basement door. It was a heavy thing, made of dark wood with black iron hinges that looked ancient. The key fit perfectly, but turning it felt wrong somehow, like I was unlocking something that was meant to stay sealed. The door resisted opening, groaning on its hinges as if it hadn't been opened in years, though I could have sworn I heard movement behind it just moments before. A set of steep stairs descended into darkness, disappearing into shadows that seemed too deep, too solid. I fumbled for a light switch and found one, but the bulb that flickered to life was weak, casting more shadows than light. The air that drifted up from below was cold and damp, carrying that same metallic scent I'd noticed earlier, only stronger now. Each step creaked under my weight as I descended, the sound echoing in ways that didn't quite make sense. About halfway down, I noticed the writing on the walls, spidery black letters that seemed to shift and move in my peripheral vision. My heart began to pound as I read them. Rules for the caretaker. Rule 1. Always close every door behind you, especially the basement door. What comes up must go back down. Rule 2. Before sleeping, knock 3 times on the bedroom wall. This keeps the peace. If you forget, you may hear knocking from the other side. Do not answer it. Rule 3. If you hear music from outside, do not look out the windows. It isn't meant for your eyes. Rule 4. Turn on the lights in every room you enter at night. Darkness breeds darkness. Rule 5. Leave a light on in the living room overnight. If you wake up to darkness, something has entered the cabin. Do not try to restore the light. Rule 6. Do not leave the cabin for any reason between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. They are hungry then. Rule 7. Under no circumstances should you read the guest ledger in the living room. Some knowledge comes at too high a price. Below the rules, in different handwriting that looked rushed and shaky, someone had added, "They're watching. They're always watching. Even now." I stood there for what felt like hours, reading and rereading the rules. Part of me wanted to laugh. This had to be some kind of elaborate joke, right? But something about the desperate way the final message was written made it impossible to dismiss entirely. That first night was the hardest. Every creak of the old house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hold movement. I followed the rules meticulously, closing each door firmly behind me, checking and double-checking the living room light. When it came time for bed, I felt ridiculous knocking 3 times on the bedroom wall, but I did it anyway. I lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the cabin settling. Or at least, I told myself it was settling. The alternative, that the footsteps I heard in the hallway or the whispers that seemed to come from the walls were something else entirely, was too terrifying to consider. Around midnight, a strange calm settled over me. The isolation that had seemed so oppressive earlier now felt almost protective. I drifted off to sleep thinking about Jeremy, wondering if he ever felt this same sense of peace before the end. I woke to sunlight streaming through my window, and for a moment everything felt normal. Then I noticed the 3 perfect circles scratched into the wall where I'd knocked the night before. The scratches in the wall were just the beginning. That first week, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, establishing a routine that might help me ignore the increasingly strange occurrences around me. During daylight hours, I focused on my caretaking duties, cleaning, checking the generator, ensuring the pipes hadn't frozen as winter approached. But each day brought new oddities that became harder to rationalize away. On Tuesday morning, I found all my coffee mugs had been rearranged in the cabinet, placed upside down in a perfect spiral pattern. When I mentioned this in my daily log, another requirement of the job, I noticed my previous day's entry had changed. The words were the same, but the handwriting slowly morphed across the page, starting as mine and ending in an elaborate script I didn't recognize. Wednesday, I spent hours cleaning the living room windows, trying to let in more light. But no matter how much I scrubbed, the glass remained cloudy, as if something on the outside was pressing against it. At one point, I could have sworn I saw handprints appearing on the other side of the glass, small ones, like a child's. But when I went outside to check, there were no marks and no footprints in the mud beneath the window. That night, I forgot to knock on the bedroom wall before falling asleep. The knocking woke me at exactly 3:33 a.m., 3 sharp raps that seemed to come from inside the wall itself. I lay there, frozen, as 3 more knocks came, then 3 more, each set louder than the last. The wall began to bulge slightly with each knock, the wallpaper rippling like water. Finally, gathering what little courage I had, I reached out and knocked 3 times in response. The sound stopped immediately, replaced by what sounded like a child giggling. When I checked the wall in the morning, the wallpaper was pristine, showing no signs of the previous night's disturbance. But it was the music that truly tested my resolve. I was washing dishes on Friday evening, watching the sun set through the kitchen window, when I first heard it. The melody was hauntingly familiar, something like a lullaby my mother used to sing, but distorted somehow, as if played backward and underwater. It seemed to be coming from the tree line, growing slightly louder with each passing moment. My hands itched to pull back the curtain, to peek outside, and see what was making that beautiful, terrible music. I remembered Rule 3. If you hear music from outside, do not look out the windows. It isn't meant for your eyes. The song grew more insistent, weaving my name into its notes. "Rachel," it seemed to whisper. "Rachel, come see." I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white, fighting the overwhelming urge to look. That's when I noticed my reflection in the window had stopped mirroring my movements. While I stood rigid at the sink, my reflection smiled and raised one hand, beckoning me closer. I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door, putting on headphones and playing music at full volume until the sun rose. That night, I dreamed of following the melody into the forest, where shadows danced between the trees and something with too many limbs conducted an orchestra I couldn't see. The next morning, I found my shoes placed neatly by the front door, caked with mud and pine needles. I tried calling the property management company, but the number only played that same haunting melody before disconnecting. My cell phone still showed no signal, and the landline in the kitchen had started whispering things when I held it to my ear. The incidents escalated quickly after that. I'd wake up to find furniture rearranged in perfect geometric patterns. Water from the taps would run red for exactly 33 seconds before clearing. The photographs on the walls changed subtly. Faces shifting position when I wasn't looking directly at them, eyes following my movement through the house. Then came the night the living room light went out. I woke suddenly, awareness hitting me like a physical blow. The familiar glow that usually seeped under my door was gone. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. If you wake up to darkness, something has entered the cabin. The silence was absolute, the kind of quiet that feels like a physical presence pressing against your eardrums. I lay there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, straining to hear any movement in the house. Finally, knowing I couldn't stay in my room forever, I gathered my courage and opened the door. The darkness in the hallway was wrong somehow, too thick, too alive. I fumbled my way to the living room, finding the light switch already in the on position. When I flicked it off and on again, nothing happened. The darkness seemed to pulse around me, breathing in time with my racing heart. That's when I heard it. A whisper so close it could have been inside my own head. "You should have followed the rules more carefully, Rachel." The voice was familiar. Too familiar. "Jeremy?" I whispered back. The laugh that answered wasn't human. I ran back to my room and locked the door, spending the rest of the night huddled under my blankets like a child. When morning came, the living room light worked perfectly, but something had changed. The cabin felt different now, more aware, more hungry. I began to notice things in my peripheral vision, shadows that moved when they shouldn't, reflections that didn't match reality. Once, I could have sworn I saw myself standing at the end of the hallway while I was in the kitchen. But this other me was wrong. Her eyes were too dark, her smile too wide, and when she lifted her hand to wave, her fingers were just a bit too long. It was around this time that I noticed the guest ledger. I swear it hadn't been there before. The leather-bound book that appeared one morning on the living room table, its spine cracked and pages yellowed with age. I knew I shouldn't read it. Rule number 7 was explicit about that. But after everything that had happened, after seeing my own doppelganger stalking the hallways, I needed answers. The moment my fingers touched the cover, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs as I opened the first page, dated 1947. First day as caretaker. Property seems normal enough, though there's something odd about the basement. The door keeps opening on its own. We'll need to check the hinges. The next entry was 3 days later, the handwriting slightly more rushed. Basement door won't stay closed. Heard children laughing down there, but when I checked, nothing. Must be the wind playing tricks. As I turned the pages, the entries became increasingly disturbing. Different handwriting styles told different stories, but they all followed a similar pattern: initial dismissal of strange events, growing paranoia, and then... The music won't stop. It's so beautiful. Maybe just one look out the window. I keep seeing myself in places I couldn't be. The other me smiles too much. The knocking. Always the knocking. Even when I knock first, it answers. It's getting closer. One entry caught my attention, the ink still looking surprisingly fresh. If you're reading this, you've already broken one of the rules. But maybe that's why you're meant to be here. The cabin isn't just a place. It's a test, a gateway. Those who pass move on to something else. Those who fail. The rest of the page was stained with what looked disturbingly like blood. I slammed the book shut, but it was too late. The damage was done. I'd broken another rule, and somehow I knew the cabin was aware of it. The walls seemed to lean in slightly, the shadows in the corners growing deeper, more purposeful. That night, in what I can only describe as a fit of either bravery or madness, I decided to test the rules further. I deliberately left the basement door open, sitting in the living room to see what would happen. The footsteps started slowly. Deliberate steps, coming up from the basement, each one making the floorboards creak in a way that seemed almost musical. I ran to close the door, but found it impossibly heavy, as if something was holding it open from the other side. In the darkness beyond the door, I saw movement. Something was climbing the stairs, something that moved in ways a human body shouldn't be able to move. I caught glimpses of too many limbs, of a face that seemed to shift and change with each step. I retreated to my bedroom, listening as the entity moved through the house. The footsteps circled my room 3 times, stopping occasionally as if testing the door. I heard whispers in multiple voices. Some I recognized, others that couldn't possibly have come from human throats. Just before dawn, the basement door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows. When I finally found the courage to leave my room, I discovered all the furniture in the house had been rearranged to face the basement door. I knew then that I had to leave. The isolation that had once seemed like a blessing now felt like a trap. I planned my escape carefully. I would leave at 5:30 a.m., just after the forbidden hours ended. But when I stepped outside that morning, my blood turned to ice. There, at the edge of the forest, was a figure. Even from a distance, I recognized myself, but wrong somehow, hollow-eyed and pale, staring back at me with an expression that made my soul shrivel. This other me raised her hand, pointing back at the cabin. Behind me, the music started again, louder than ever before. When I turned around, I saw dozens of faces pressed against the cabin's windows, faces I recognized from the photographs in the hallway, all watching me with black, empty eyes. I retreated back inside, understanding now that leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking away. Whatever force governed this place had its hooks in me, and it wouldn't let go easily. The next few days became a blur of paranoia and strict rule adherence. I followed every instruction to the letter, hoping that if I proved myself, I would be allowed to leave. The cabin seemed to watch my efforts with amusement, occasionally reminding me of its power through increasingly impossible violations of reality. Doors began leading to different rooms than they should. Windows showed impossible views, sometimes other versions of the cabin, sometimes landscapes that couldn't exist in our world. My reflection stopped appearing in mirrors entirely, replaced by different versions of myself at various ages, all watching me with those same hollow eyes. On what I had decided would be my final night, I heard the music again. It was different this time, clearer, more purposeful. Through the windows, I could see a path through the trees, marked by strange floating lights that pulsed in time with the melody. The music called to me, promising answers, promising freedom. Every instinct screamed at me to stay inside, to follow the rules. But something deeper knew that this moment, this choice, was what everything had been leading to. At 3 a.m., I stepped outside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the night air changed. It became thick, almost liquid, carrying that same metallic taste I'd first noticed in the basement. The music wrapped around me like a physical thing, guiding me toward the tree line where those strange lights hovered. Each step felt both wrong and inevitable. The ground beneath my feet didn't quite match what my eyes saw. Sometimes it seemed yards below me, sometimes inches away. The trees themselves appeared to breathe, their bark rippling like water whenever I looked directly at them. I thought about Jeremy then, about that last day I saw him, standing in my classroom after the final bell. How he'd smiled at me, that same hollow smile I'd seen on my doppelganger's face, and said, "Sometimes the only way out is through, Ms. Mason." The next morning, they found him in the school library, or what was left of him. The path through the forest twisted in impossible ways. Sometimes I was walking uphill while feeling like I was descending. Other times the path seemed to loop back on itself while still moving forward. The lights leading the way cast no shadows, even when they passed directly overhead. As I walked deeper into the woods, I began to notice things moving in the darkness between the trees. Shapes that shouldn't exist, fragments of memories that didn't belong to me. I saw myself teaching classes I'd never taught, to rooms full of students with Jeremy's face. I saw the cabin from different angles in different times, sometimes pristine and new, sometimes ancient and decaying, sometimes something in between that hurt my eyes to look at. The music grew louder, more insistent. It had words now, though not in any language I understood. Yet somehow I knew what it was saying. Almost there. Almost home. After what felt like hours, or maybe minutes, time had lost all meaning, I reached a clearing. And there, perfectly maintained and glowing softly in the darkness, stood another cabin. It was identical to the one I'd left, but untouched by time or decay. Warm light spilled from its windows, and smoke curled from the chimney in patterns that spelled out words I almost understood. A man stood on the porch, smiling at me. He looked exactly like the figure I'd seen in my visions, but now I understood why he seemed so familiar. He had Jeremy's eyes. "Welcome home, Ms. Mason," he said, opening the door. "You've passed the test." "What test?" My voice sounded strange to my ears, as if it was coming from very far away. "What is this place?" He gestured around us. "A gateway. A crossing point. Those who come here are chosen. People who've touched the edge between worlds before. People like you, who've watched someone cross over. People like Jeremy." "Jeremy?" I whispered. "He knew about this place?" The man, or whatever he was, nodded. "He was meant to be a caretaker too, but he was too young, too impatient. He tried to force his way through. That's not how it works. The rules exist for a reason." As if in response to his words, the forest behind me erupted with sound. That same haunting music, but distorted now, desperate. I turned to look and saw shapes emerging from between the trees. People, or things that had once been people, all moving in that wrong way I'd seen in the basement. All reaching, all calling. "The ones who failed," my guide explained. "The ones who broke the rules, who looked when they shouldn't have looked, who opened doors that should have stayed closed. They're still here, in their own way, waiting. I thought about the guest ledger, about all those entries that ended abruptly, about the bloodstains on the pages. And now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Now you choose. You can take your place here, become a true caretaker, help guide others across when they're ready, or ... He gestured back toward the forest, where the shapes were growing more distinct, more hungry. I looked through the open door of the new cabin. Inside, I could see a warm fire burning in the fireplace, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with books. But more than that, I could feel something I hadn't felt since before Jeremy's death. Peace. "What are the rules here?" I asked. He smiled, a real smile this time, not the hollow one from my visions. "Just one. Be true to what you are. You're a teacher, Rachel. You always have been. There will be others like Jeremy, like you. They'll need guidance to cross over properly." I took one last look at the forest behind me, at the shapes that seemed to be slowly fading back into the darkness. Then I stepped through the door. That was 3 years ago. I'm still here, watching through windows that show me more than just the outside world. Sometimes I see new caretakers arriving at the old cabin, each carrying their own burdens, their own reasons for seeking escape. Some of them make it. Some don't. The rules remain the same, though now I understand their true purpose. They're not just guidelines for survival. They're tests, filters, ways of determining who's ready to cross over and who needs to stay behind. I keep my own ledger now, but this one isn't stained with blood. It's filled with names, dates, and notes about those who've made it through. Jeremy's name is in there, though not in the way you might think. He did cross over eventually, in his own way. So, if you ever find yourself taking a caretaker position at a remote cabin in the mountains, pay attention to the rules. Follow them not because you're afraid, but because they're showing you the way home. And if you hear music in the night, if you see lights between the trees, well, maybe you're ready too. Just remember, some doors only open one way, and the knocking, it never really stops. It just changes meaning.